Hi there. My name is Jesse Archibald Barber, and I'm a professor of Indigenous Literatures at the First Nations University of Canada. I'd like to thank the organizers of the Poundmaker Performance Festival for giving me this opportunity to share some of my experiences with you all today. The topic of my presentation is on performing ceremony and community in Making Treaty 4. Now, the Making Treaty 4 project was a performance that a group of us put together and staged in the winter of 2017, and then we staged it again that summer. And then the performance was picked up by the Globe Theatre, where it did a 3 week run in their 2018 season in the spring. Um, so there's lots of scenes and aspects of that performance that really connect ceremony with performance in the context of community. Um, but before I get to that, I'd like to give some background to the project and how it came about. So around 2010, 2011, I joined a performance group called the Collective Performance Storytelling Ensemble, which was led by Michelle Serreta, who is pictured here in the middle in the pink shirt. And the group of us put together performances that dealt with Indigenous histories here in Canada, but also from around the world in an international context as well. One of the performances we did was called Transactions, and we staged that at the First Nations University in the atrium, or the Veterans Memorial Teepee. And we did a night show where we got to really play with the reflective surfaces of the space, as you can see here. And then we also did a daytime show where the light gave us a completely different atmosphere to the project. After this performance, which we did in the fall of 2014, it was after this that Michelle and myself, along with Kathleen Irwin from the University of Regina Theatre Department, wanted to bring together Indigenous artists in a performance festival, which we called Performing Turtle Island. And so we began working on that and organizing it, and we wanted to put that on in the fall of 2015. It was around this time also that Michelle and I started to collaborate on putting together a project called Making Treaty 4. Now, Michelle had been working with the folks from Making Treaty 7, which was the inspiration for the Making Treaty 4 project. And we were about to embark on developing that project when tragically a car accident took the lives of two members of Making Treaty 7, Michael Green and Narcissus Blood, as well as two members of Making Treaty 4, Lacey Moore and Desjardins, as well as Michelle Serreta, our leader. This was devastating to the communities here in Regina and across Saskatchewan, as well as in Calgary and really across the country. And it took us a while to really come to terms with that. But later that year, we did go ahead with the Performing Turtle Island Festival. And it was there that we gave a memorial performance of Transactions. So we opened the Performing Turtle Island gathering with a memorial dedication of the Transactions performance. And we used the prayer teepee as a ceremonial space for the performance, with the permission of the Escapio and the elders, of course. And we did this because we wanted to bring the community together in a kind of collective symbolic action as a way of sharing the experience of mourning and healing from the loss that we had all faced with the accident. And here really performance is ceremony. And you can see through just going through some of the slides here, um, it was that's Janine, who is going into the prayer teepee, which we saw as the ceremonial or spiritual space. And later in the performance, there's all kinds of other scenes going on, but just for the sake of time, I'm just jumping to the end here, where Janine comes out of the ceremonial space and, in a bold and confident manner, gives a message of healing and reassurance to the audience. So it was a way for us to delve deep into our memories and then bring that out into the communal space, right? And a lot of the performances in the gathering throughout the 3 days also dealt with that connection between ceremonial space and performance space, and how sometimes they're disconnected and sometimes they overlap and sometimes they're one and the same. Um, and sometimes they'll push the boundaries of protocols, um, but in all ways, and in all manners, we were respectful of traditional protocols, um, with always with that goal of um, drawing the community together. Now, after the Performing Turtle Island gathering, our performance group took a break. Um, we didn't really want to pursue the Making Treaty 4 project at that time. It wasn't till several months later, and actually about a year after the accident, that some folks from Making Treaty 7 got in touch with me through Errol Canistano, who was a member of our performance group. And we all met at the First Nations University. And the, the folks from Making Treaty 7 really encouraged us to pick up the project again. And I got to say, that was really uplifting to all of us. It reinvigorated our enthusiasm for the project, and so it was from that point, which was late winter 2016, that we started to plan again for the project. Um, Now, of course, one of the first things I wanted to do was to secure some funding. So I applied for and received a Canada 150 grant, which was really great news. And then, of course, the more important thing that I wanted to do was build a community. So what I did was I created a performance course, because we have so many talented students and staff members at First Nations University and in the wider community, that I thought it would be a great idea to create a performance course, and bring together students and staff as well as theater professionals. And so in the winter of 2017, in January, we started to workshop um, ideas and scenes for Making Treaty 4. And we would meet every week in the atrium of First Nations University, and it was here where we, you know, did exercises and brought our ideas together, and then began workshopping certain scenes. So the way the process worked was, I had come up with a number of ideas for scenes, but I didn't want to just go sit down at a desk and write this performance, by myself alone in some room. I wanted it to be a collaborative experience from the community right from the start. So what I did was I came up, I identified certain ideas and concepts and historical events in Treaty 4. And then we broke the class. There was about 25, 26 students, and then in addition, another 10 or so theater professionals that were part of this course. And we broke into groups, and then I would bring an idea to each group and then ask them to workshop or come up with a scene based around that idea. So, for instance, the women's contribution to the Treaty 4 history, or the legacy of residential school, or how the spiritual ideas behind the treaty, how those came about, things like that, right? And so we got together, and as you see, we first rehearsed in the atrium, and then we moved to the some of the studio space at the University of Regina Theatre Department, and then eventually we made it to the main stage at the Riddell Center at the U of R. And you see here a picture of, that's Aaron Goodpipe, one of the key performers and writers of the project, along with Noel Starblanket, who was our Making Treaty 4 elder, who was an incredible inspiration to all of us. And there were so many people involved. I'm just going to put up this card here so that you can see the different scenes and the performers that were involved in each scene. So the performance opens in a ceremonial space, in a spiritual space. And in the video here, these are spirit beings who have come down from the stars and are standing in a circle or a semicircle around the body of a young man who had recently died by taking his own life. And so we start with a very significant topic and situation right from the start. And actually this scene is the last scene of the performance. But we start with the last scene, and then we go through and, of course, circle back. The thing that we wanted to avoid in this performance was doing a literal historical reenactment of the Treaty 4 signing. We wanted to take a conceptual approach through more abstract ideas and through movement and dance, among other things. And so it's here where we build that atmosphere of a spiritual context. The next scene focused on the warriors and chiefs that were present at the time of the treaty signing. And again, it's not exactly historically accurate, but we wanted to focus on a character who was struggling with whether to have his people sign the treaty or not. And so we focused on those debates and the conflicts and arguments that would have arisen at the time. And then this one character played by Teddy Bison, who goes on a vision quest to seek guidance from the treaty spirits. Now this scene is really significant in the context of ceremony and performance, because again here ceremony is performance. And one of the things that Teddy struggled with in developing this piece was, or this scene, was that at first he felt uncomfortable whether or not he could perform it according to protocol. Now one thing, we didn't use a real pipe. We didn't go that far, so that the pipe in the scene is a prop. But the performance itself is not a prop in the sense that um, for Teddy, when he's lifting the pipe and in the four directions, for him this was real. The only way that he could do this was if it is was if he was enacting the ceremony for real. So uh, in that sense, we consulted the elder and to ask if this was a proper way to go about it, and um, we felt that that this was something important, and that it would have it wouldn't have worked if the ceremony was just a performance, right? So for Teddy, each time he performed this scene, um, he was making ceremony and not just performing it. Okay, for the next scene, we wanted to focus on the role of women at the time of the Treaty 4 negotiations. Now we know that women had a central role in indigenous communities, um, but when you look at the history books of Treaty 4, there's very little presence of women included in those negotiations. Indeed, Indigenous women's voices have been buried by Canadian history. So that's one thing we wanted to address. And so this particular group got together and imagined, what the women would have been doing at the time, the things that they would have been discussing amongst each other, and the concerns that they would have been raising with the chiefs and leaders um, to ensure that we're included in the treaty negotiations. And so we had a lot of fun with this. In with and our main goal was to recapitulate women's voices as and put it front and center stage, right? And here we see um, the women making ceremony and drawing on guidance from the treaty spirits, which they then pass on to the chief to bring to the treaty negotiations. So this scene was a lot of fun to develop, but it was also very inspirational because we felt that this was a missing piece of our history. A lot of this history is passed down through oral tradition, but it's certainly not a part of the history books. So we felt um, inspired to uh, to revive that part of our history and culture again by connecting ceremony in this communal process. Now, this scene here was also incredibly inspiring to put together. It's based on a letter by the original Chief Starblanket, which he wrote in 1912 and sent to the Governor General at the time. And this letter is considered one of the first acts of treaty activism in the country. And in it, he, you know, draws attention to the fact that many of the promises in the treaty have not been fulfilled. And significantly, he also raises awareness of the problems with the residential schools and how children were being taken from their families and communities and not treated respectfully at all, to say the least, in the residential schools. So this was well known. This letter indicates that all of these issues were well known at that time. And what's really incredible about this scene is that the elder there, Noel Starblanket, is a grandson of the original Chief Starblanket. And then beside him, reading the letter, is Noel's grandson, right? So this was an amazing opportunity to bring together history and performance on the stage that is tied directly into our treaty for territory as well as our history. Um, so this in itself is incredibly powerful, I think, for that reason. And we were so excited um, that we had this opportunity to bring this together. Okay, the next scene goes straight into the topic of residential schools. Now, for this scene, I wanted to approach it in a conceptual way, and I drew inspiration from this famous before and after photo of Thomas More Cusick, who was a young boy from Muscopetang who attended the Regina Indian Industrial School. And you see here, this is a staged photo of him in traditional dress before entering residential school, and then, of course, in Western attire after spending some time at the school. And so I brought this photo to the group and suggested that we dramatize this transformation, right? And what we came up with was incredibly powerful. You see here some of the images from the scene. That's Teddy, and who plays the father, who has to let his son go. That's played by Pete Kitewahat. And he has to let him go to the school. And then here we have, this is Skylar Anderson and Aaron Goodpipe playing the priest and the nun. Now, something significant about this, of course, is at first the actors were very hesitant, understandably, to play these characters because of the abuses and the monstrosity of that history. However, I drew on from my own experience to help give them advice. In my own experience, a friend in a previous performance, a friend wanted me to play a residential school priest, and my first reaction was absolutely not. Right, that was the last thing I ever wanted to be. I didn't want to be seen dressed up like that, or have to get into that character, right? But then once he insisted, he really encouraged me, no, to do this because the project that he was working on was very important to him. And after thinking about it for a while and going, workshopping it and that, it I realized that playing this role and playing these kinds of roles is extremely important in terms of finding some path to decolonization and even some kind of healing toward reconciliation. This is because the actual perpetrators, right, the real people in history, would never perform these roles on stage, right? That would be just um, too real, right, in that sense. So it's really up to us, right, as indigenous actors and writers and performers to play these roles, right? And in doing so, it becomes a powerful act of decolonization, right? And so that was the way that we approached this scene. And I gotta say, Skylar and Aaron just did an amazing job, as did Pete, who plays the young boy going into the school. And you can see it's extremely violent. And we didn't want to hold back on the violence, though it was, this was where we did run into some difficulties because, of course, a scene like this um, can't help but trigger some of the audience members. And we were very sensitive to that, of course. But we consulted um, our Treaty 4 elder, Noel Starblanket, as well as elders in the community and in our families, and they felt that this was something important that we should still do. So we went ahead with it, but it was extremely traumatizing to do, not just for the audience, but also for the actors. And in that way as well, all of these scenes weren't just they were of course traumatizing for the actors, but then the other parts of the performance as well were healing as well. So it was, in that sense, these scenes were cathartic, right? They in the truest sense of the word. Okay, this scene is a few scenes later, but it follows thematically from the residential school scene. It's set in more modern times, and it's about the '60s scoop. And again, you have the same characters who played the priest and the nun are now playing the doctor and the nurse. And again, is the same kind of struggle with having to play the role of the perpetrators of this colonial violence on indigenous bodies. But again, the we we uh, we recognized the fact that actual perpetrators would never play these roles, and so it was up to us to do this. And again, in that way, um, this the very pr- process of performance was a way for us to heal from many of those traumas, which are often transgenerational in effect. And here, it's a few scenes later. There's many scenes throughout that I'm kind of skipping over just for the sake of time. Um, but we did another scene on focusing on First Nations veterans and the struggles that they came home that they faced when they returned. But I'm just going to jump to this scene here where we address the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women. And for this, we just wanted to go have a very stark lighting, um, and well, the scene speaks for itself. Okay, so I'm just moving to the last scene of the performance. Um, Again, there were many other scenes, some involving, we did some scenes focusing on um, gang life as well as police violence and then youth suicide in our communities as well. A lot of very difficult subjects. But there was also, we also focused on, we wanted to end on an uplifting note, of course, that brought everyone together. And so we return, where we began at the end, where the spirit beings are um, kind of in a in a council debating the fate of this young man, and we we were really struggling on how to wrap up the performance because at this point, like, there was no real you know perfect way to tie everything together, and it was in this sense though that we turned to our elder Noel Starblanket, and he did an amazing job of just coming out and just speaking to us all these words of wisdom straight from the heart. And I'll just play a bit of that here. Okay, so we wanted to conclude the performance in an inspiring way. And we thought the best way to do that would be to bring everyone together in a round dance ceremony. And it looked spectacular, especially against the cosmic background. And in that way, we were calling together the ancestors along with the audience members to come together in that spirit of community. And we'll see here in the video how the two main characters address the audience at the end here.
We've all made treaty with the animals, the plants, and the spirits.
So we challenge you today. How do you make treaty? And how will you continue to make Treaty 4?
Okay, so that concludes my presentation. I hope I was able to share some interesting ideas and insights into the connection between performance and ceremony, along with some of the issues that performers face when portraying history and drawing on ceremony for their performances. I know for myself, this was a wonderful experience working with the students and community members in this context. As I mentioned from the start, I didn't just want to sit down and write this piece in isolation, but I wanted it to be a communal experience from the start. And that's why we took a kind of devised theater approach in workshopping the scenes and then structuring the play as a whole. And it was incredibly inspiring when the Globe Theater asked to take on the project. The Globe Theater is the biggest theater company in Regina, and they did a production of Making Treaty 4 in their 2018 season, and a number of the main performers from the 2017 production worked with the Globe in that. Myself, I wasn't able to go along with the piece just because my work at the university keeps me pretty busy. But it was wonderful to be able to see this production grow and to put it into other hands, because really the performance as a whole, based in community and coming out of ceremony, was and the context that it came out of in terms of as a kind of memorial to the people that we had lost. It was a way of people sharing memory as a whole. So thank you again. Thank you for listening. Thank you again to the organizers of the Poundmaker Performance Festival. I wish you all well, and have a good day. Thank you. Miigwech.